Greetings summoners and welcome back to Lots of Lore. Today I give to you the full lore reading of Thresh, the Chain Warden. Enjoy. The horrifying spectre, now known as Thresh, was once a simple, if troubled man. In an age of history has all but forgotten, he was a lowly warden of an order devoted to the gathering and protection of arcane knowledge. This order was established on the Blessed Isles, which were hidden and protected from the outside world by magical pale mist. The master of the order acknowledged Thresh long years of service and tasked him with the custodianship of certain hidden vaults beneath the city of Helia. It was there that a vast, secret collection of dangerous artifacts was kept under lock and key. Incredibly strong-willed and methodical, Thresh was well suited for such work, but even then, his penchant for cruelty had been noticed by his brethren. While it had not yet been manifested in murderous ways, at least none that could be proven, he was shunned by many. It became clear he had been given a job that kept him away from others, preventing him from gaining the recognition he felt he deserved. Solitary years in the darkness took their toll, and Thresh grew ever more bitter and jealous as he patrolled the long halls with his lantern staff, and only his own resentful thoughts for company. His moment of opportunity came when the armies of a mad king managed to pierce the veiling mist and arrived unbidden upon the shores of the Blessed Isles. Secretly, Thresh delighted in the slaughter that followed. The invading king was obsessed with resurrecting his dead queen, and Thresh willingly led him to the fabled waters of life. None but the most senior member of the order had ever been permitted to enter the hidden catacombs that housed the waters. Now, with the king's greatest warriors at his back, Thresh laughed as the guardians of that sacred place were cut down before him. Finally, he believed he would get what he had long deserved. Only those who were there could say what truly occurred when the king lowered the lifeless corpse of his wife into the waters, but the aftermath would shake the whole of Runeterra. A catastrophic blast wave of dark energy surged outward, engulfing Helia and spreading rapidly across the rest of the Blessed Isles, and the white mist that had once protected them turned black and predatory. Every living thing in its past perished in an instant, and yet the spirit could not move on, caught in a horrifying new existence somewhere between life and death. Thresh himself was among the first to be claimed, but while others screamed in anguish at their fate, he reveled in it. He arose from this cataclysm, this ruination, as a spectral monstrosity, relishing the chance to torment others without fear of reprisal, and unfettered by the limits of mortality. Over the decades and centuries that followed, his supernatural appearance slowly changed to match the malice and cruelty that had always festered in his heart. To his amusement, Thresh came to realize that most other spirits trapped within the black mist retained only fragments of their former selves, even the strongest of the foreign invaders, such as Hecarim and Ledrose, while his power continued to grow. Driven by spite to prey upon those he perceives as lesser souls, Thresh's favorite victims have always been those who will suffer the most from his attention. No matter how strong their resolve, resilient or fate, he strived to break them as slowly as possible by learning their fears and weaknesses and toying with them to the very end. Only when their lives lay in tatters, their loved ones taken from them, their sense of purpose lost, and their last glimmer of hope snuffed out, do Thresh hooked chains finally drag them into his undying grasp. Even so, death brings no merciful release, for he tears out the soul of all he kills, imprisoning them within his accursed lantern, to be unwilling witnesses to his depredation for all eternity. Only a single soul has ever escaped him. Senna, one of the hated Sentinels of Light, died a futile death after facing Thresh in some forgotten Eldrake vault. Her distraught husband, Lucian, then pursued the cruel spirit for years, becoming singularly obsessed with the hunt, letting his grief and rage consume him almost entirely. To Thresh, it was delectable. However, before he could finally claim Lucian's soul, a vengeful blow split Thresh's lantern open and freed Senna from it. Intrigued by their obvious strength of their mortal bond, he has decided to allow them this small and insignificant victory, knowing all too well that the game of light and shadow they all play is still far from over. Short story: The Collection. A horrible scraping of metal chains drifting over the fields. Outside, an unnatural fog rendered the moon and stars all but invisible, and the regular hum of insect fell silent. Thresh approached a ruined hovel. He raised his lantern, not to see his surrounding, but to look inside the glass. The interior of the lantern resembled a starry nightscape with its thousands of tiny green glowing orbs, there buzzing frantically as if trying to escape Thresh's gaze, his mouth twisting in a grotesque grin, teeth glinting from the glow. Each of the lights was precious to him. Behind the door, a man whimpered. Thresh sensed his pain and was drawn to it. He knew the man suffering like an old friend. Thresh had only appeared to the man once, decades ago, but since then, the spectre had taken everyone the man held dear, from his favorite horse to his mother, brother, and recently a manservant who had become a close confidant. The spectre made no pretend of natural deaths. He wanted the man to know who caused each loss. The spirit passed through the door, scraping his chains as they dragged behind him. The walls were damp and ingrained with years of grime. The man looked even worse, his hair long and matted, his skin covered in scabs, angry and raw from clawing. He wore what had once been fine, velvet clothes, but were now little more than torn, tattered rags. The man shakes from the sudden green glow, covering his eyes. He shook violently, backing away into the corner. "Please, please not you," he whispered. "Long ago I claimed you as mine." Thresh's voice crackled and stretched as he had not spoken for an age. "It's time I collect." "I'm dying," the man said, his voice barely audible. "If you're here to kill me, you best hurry." He made an effort to look at Thresh directly. Thresh stretched his mouth wide. "Your death is not my desire." He set the glass door of his lantern slightly ajar. Strange sounds come from within, a cacophony of screams. The man did not react, not at first. So many screams emerged, they blended together like scraping glass shards. But his eyes widened in horror as he heard voices he recognized, pleading from Thresh's lantern. He heard his mother, his brother, his friends, and finally the sound he dreaded most, his children's, wailing as if being burned alive. "What have you done?" he screamed. He scrambled for something to throw, a broken chair, and threw it at Thresh with all his strength. It passed through the spectre harmlessly, and Thresh laughed mirthlessly. The man ran at Thresh, eyes wild with fury. The spectre's hook chain whipped out like striking snakes. The barbed hook struck the mortal's chest, cracking ribs and piercing his heart. The man fell to his knees, face twisted in delicious agony. "I left them to keep them safe," the man cried. Blood gurgled from his mouth. Thresh wrenched his chains hard. For a moment, the man did not move. Then, the ripping began. Like a rough spun sheet being slowly torn, he was excruciatingly being pulled from himself. His body convulsed violently and blood sprayed along the walls. "Now we begin," said Thresh. He pulled the captured soul, pulsing brightly from the end of the chain, and trapped him within the lantern. The man's hollow corpse collapsed as Thresh departed. Thresh followed the curling black mist away from the cottage, with his glowing lantern held high. Only after Thresh was gone and the fog dissipated did the insect resume their nightly chorus, and stars once again filled the night sky. And that, summoners, concludes Thresh. As you can probably guess, his bio has gotten a small update, so it includes Senna, and also tells why he doesn't give a fuck about Lucian and Senna at this point. Also, it mentions Hecarim and Lederos, who are two characters in other stories. I already covered Hecarims and suggest you see that video. Ledrose is another story called The Echoes Left Behind. It's a rather long story, but you may or may not know that Ledrose is a card in the Legends of Runeterra game. But if you want more awesome lore, I suggest you subscribe to the channel, and until next time, enjoy!